It was a bright Sunday morning on April 8, 2018, in the heart of Buga, Colombia. The city square was buzzing with the usual crowd of tourists, all staring up at the city's most famous landmark, the Sphere. It's a massive 20-ton bronze monument, exactly 3 meters wide and covered in strange ancient symbols that have baffled historians for decades. Nobody has ever been able to crack the code. But on this particular day, the impossible was about to happen. It started as a typical family outing. Maya and Ben just wanted to show their 4-year-old son, Leo, the famous monument. Leo was wearing his favorite dinosaur t-shirt, looking like any other kid, until they reached the base of the sphere. While Ben was busy explaining the history of the monument and Maya was snapping photos, something shifted. Leo suddenly let go of his father's hand. He didn't run or play. He walked straight toward the sphere with a look of intense, eerie seriousness that you just don't see on a toddler's face. He placed both of his tiny hands on the cold metal surface. His eyes began to trace the ancient carvings, as if he were simply reading a bedtime story. Maya felt a sudden, inexplicable chill run down her spine. There was something in her son's gaze, something deep and ancient. Then, Leo started to speak. He didn't babble or stutter. His voice came out clear, firm, and disturbingly mature. "Something is waiting down here," he said. 7 steps toward the rising sun, where the shadow hits the earth at noon. Maya and Ben froze, exchanging a look of pure confusion. The tourists nearby stopped in their tracks. An old man selling clay figurines nearby actually dropped one, the sound of it shattering being the only noise in the now silent square. How could a 4-year-old know those words? Ben tried to laugh it off, a nervous, shaky sound. Kids say the craziest things, right? He joked to the crowd forming around them. But Maya couldn't look away. Leo was still there, hand pressed against the metal, his lips moving silently as if he were whispering to someone or something invisible. She knelt beside him and touched his shoulder. "Honey, are you okay?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Leo turned to look at her. His eyes looked different, darker, older. "Mom, they want us to find what they left behind. It's important." The air felt heavy, almost hard to breathe. The old street vendor limped over, his hands shaking. "Ma'am," he said, "I've lived here for 62 years. I've never seen anyone touch the sphere like that. My grandfather used to say only a chosen one could read those signs, but we all thought it was just a legend." Ben pulled out his phone to record the moment, but every time he aimed the camera at the symbols Leo was touching, his screen went pitch black. He tried 3 times. Same result. Other tourists tried to snap photos too, but their phones started glitching and freezing. A woman in the crowd shrieked and backed away. A group of college students stood there with their mouths hanging open. Finally, Leo let go of the sphere. He turned and walked exactly 7 steps to the east, stopping at a very specific spot on the pavement. "Here," he said with total confidence. "When the sun is at its highest, the shadow of the sphere will touch this exact spot. That's where the entrance is." Maya felt her legs go weak. An entrance? To what? Her son could barely count to 20, yet here he was talking about solar measurements and hidden entries. She had no idea that this was just the beginning of a story that would rewrite everything they knew about history. An entrance? An entrance to what? Maya stood there, her mind racing. How could her 4-year-old son know anything about solar shadows or geometric alignments? Leo had just learned to count to 20 last week. But the most unsettling part was just beginning, a revelation that was about to turn everything they knew about history upside down. The rumor spread through Buga like a wildfire in a dry forest. Within 2 hours, the quiet square was packed. Local news crews arrived with cameras, and soon Professor Miller, a historian from the regional university who had spent 30 years studying ancient cultures, showed up with a group of his students. Everyone wanted to see the boy and the sphere phenomenon for themselves. Maya and Ben were overwhelmed. Leo had fallen fast asleep in Ben's arms, looking completely exhausted after his strange outburst. But right before he drifted off, he had whispered the same phrase 7 times. "Wait for noon, when the sun is highest. That's when you'll see the truth." Professor Miller approached the family, his eyes wide with urgency. "Please," he pleaded, "let me be here when the clock strikes 12. If what your son said is true, we might be looking at the biggest archaeological find in history." The next couple of hours felt like a lifetime. Around 11:30 a.m., Leo woke up. He seemed like his normal self, again totally oblivious. He asked for a vanilla ice cream and started playing with a toy car Maya always kept in her purse. He didn't remember a single word he had said. "Mom, why are all these people looking at us?" he asked innocently, licking his ice cream. Maya and Ben just looked at each other, terrified. Was it a medical episode? A possession? There was no time for theories. By 11:58 a.m., the sun was blazing at its peak in the clear blue sky. The crowd held its breath. Professor Miller had placed small markers on the ground, exactly where Leo had pointed earlier. And then it happened. At exactly 12 p.m., the shadow of the sphere stretched across the pavement. The tip of the shadow landed precisely on Professor Miller's marks. But that wasn't the shock. At that exact spot, the ground began to sink. A deep, heavy mechanical groan echoed from beneath the earth. Panic rippled through the crowd. People scrambled back, but Professor Miller rushed toward the sinking pavement. He knelt down, tracing his fingers over the cracks. "This isn't a sinkhole," he whispered, mesmerized by the perfectly straight lines. "This was engineered. It's a hatch." Within minutes, the local authorities arrived. Mayor Robert ordered the area to be cordoned off immediately. Engineers brought in ground-penetrating radar, and the results were impossible. Exactly 4.5 meters below them sat a hollow chamber 8 meters wide. It didn't appear on any city map or historical record. It shouldn't have been there. Leo, watching from his mother's arms, suddenly pointed at the sphere again. That strange, mature voice was back. "There's a key," he said. "Look for the symbol that looks like a bird with 3 wings. You have to turn it to the left." Professor Miller's heart nearly jumped out of his chest. He ran to the sphere, scanning every inch. Among the dozens of carvings, he found it a strange 3-winged bird design he had never seen in any textbook. With shaking hands, he tried to push it. Nothing. He tried turning it to the right. Still nothing. Finally, following Leo's exact instructions, he twisted it to the left. Clack! A loud metallic click echoed through the square. The crowd gasped as the pavement where the shadow had landed began to peel away like a mechanical flower opening up. Beneath it, a set of stone stairs led down into a pitch-black abyss. A cold, ancient draft of air rushed out from the depths, smelling of damp earth and something else. Something that hadn't been touched for centuries. A blast of freezing, ancient air hit them. It smelled of wet earth and something else, a scent so old it felt like it belonged to another world. The government didn't waste a second. Within 24 hours, a team of elite archaeologists arrived in Buga, armed with high-tech lights and sensors. The big descent was set for the following morning, April 9th. But that night, something chilling happened in the family's hotel room. At 3 a.m., Maya woke up to the sound of soft footsteps. She found Leo standing by the window, staring out at the empty town square where the sphere was being guarded by spotlights. "They're happy now," Leo whispered without turning around. "They've been waiting a long time to be found." Maya felt the hair on her arm stand up. "Who is happy, sweetie?" she asked, stepping closer. Leo finally turned to her. His eyes caught the moonlight in a way that looked almost supernatural. The guardians of the lost knowledge. They left everything down there for when the time was right. The next morning, Professor Miller insisted that Leo join the descent. "The boy is the key," he argued. "Without him, we'd still be staring at a bronze ball." We might need him down there. After a heated debate, the authorities agreed. Leo would be the youngest person ever to lead an official archaeological expedition. At 10 a.m., the team began the climb down. 12 people descended the stone stairs, each step a perfect 22 centimeters high, carved with a mathematical precision that shouldn't have been possible for ancient people. The walls were covered in symbols, and Leo touched them as he walked, smiling as if he were greeting old friends. After 63 steps, they reached a massive circular chamber. When the LED floodlights flickered on, the entire team stopped breathing. History wasn't just being made, it was being erased and rewritten. The walls were lined with thin, shimmering sheets of pure gold. But it wasn't the gold that shocked them. It was what was etched into it. Detailed maps of the entire American continent. But these weren't primitive sketches. They showed coastlines and geography that were only discovered after centuries of European exploration. "This is impossible," Professor Miller stammered, his camera clicking frantically. "This knowledge shouldn't have existed 500 years ago." Dr. Sarah, the team's specialist in ancient metals, took samples with shaking hands. In the center of the room sat a heavy stone table holding 3 objects: a perfectly polished disc of black crystal, a set of strange astronomical tools, and a wooden chest that had turned to stone over time. Leo let go of Maya's hand and walked straight to the black crystal disc. Before anyone could stop him, he slammed his tiny palms onto its surface. The crystal erupted with light. Vibrant colors danced across the gold walls, and images began to project into the air like high-definition holograms. The team watched in stunned silence as scenes of an unknown civilization played out before them. They saw people in elaborate robes building massive monuments, observatories far more advanced than anything from that era. And then, something that made Ben's voice crack. Strange ships gliding through the clouds. "What are we looking at?" Ben whispered. Professor Miller couldn't even answer. Everything he had taught for 30 years was crumbling in front of him. The projection lasted exactly 3 minutes and 42 seconds. Then, the light vanished. Leo pulled his hands away and stumbled back. Maya caught him just before he fell. The boy was gasping for air, but he was smiling. "You saw it now," he said, his voice returning to that of a normal 4-year-old. "Now you know we aren't alone." We never were. The news hit the world like a tidal wave. The government immediately declared the square a high-security zone, and the military moved in to block off every entrance. Only a handful of people were allowed near the underground chamber. For the next month, Dr. Sarah and her team worked around the clock. She sent samples of the gold plating to top labs in Switzerland and the US, and the results were chilling. The gold wasn't just gold. It was an alloy that shouldn't exist in nature. It contained high traces of iridium, a metal usually found in meteorites. This suggests either an incredibly advanced melting technology, Dr. Sarah explained in a private briefing, or access to materials that aren't even from this planet. By mid-May, the story of the boy who cracked the code was on every news channel from New York to Tokyo. But the authorities were hiding the biggest details. They only released a few blurry photos. The video of the holographic projections was kept strictly classified. It was too revolutionary, too terrifying for the public to see. Leo eventually went back to his normal life in the city. He went to preschool, played with LEGOs, and watched cartoons like any other 4-year-old. But something was different. He was constantly drawing. His notebooks were filled with the same symbols found in the chamber. One day, his teacher, Ms. Julie, pulled Maya aside. "I'm worried about Leo," she whispered. "He says these drawings are letters from those who came before. He says they teach him while he sleeps. Maybe he should see a specialist?" Maya didn't need a doctor to tell her something was happening. Every night, she listened to Leo talking in his sleep. He spoke a language that no linguist could identify, a mix of extinct Amazonian dialects and something even older, something that predated every known civilization. Then, On June 23rd, the second revelation arrived. Leo woke up screaming in the middle of the night. Maya ran into his room and found him sitting up, staring at the window with wide, trance-like eyes. "We have to go back," he shouted. "There's something else. Something important they missed." Ben immediately called Professor Miller. Even though it was 2 a.m., the professor picked up on the first ring. "Bring him back to Buga," Miller ordered. "If that boy says something is missing, we listen." By 6 a.m., they were back at the square. Leo didn't even look at the sphere this time. Instead, he knelt on the ground and started pounding the pavement with his tiny fists. "Down here, deeper. There's another room." Professor Miller called for the ground radar again. The technicians scanned the area for 2 hours until their screens showed something breathtaking. Exactly 3 meters below the first chamber, there was a second, much larger structure. The new excavation began that same afternoon under total secrecy. They set up black tents so no one could see what they were doing. It took 11 days to break through. The descent was dangerous. The walls were shaky, and they had to install metal supports every few feet. Leo insisted on going down. "I have to be there," he said in that hauntingly mature voice. "There is something only I can open." On July 4th, 2018, they finally reached the second chamber. It was twice the size of the first 116 meters wide. And right in the center, sitting on a pedestal of black volcanic glass, was an object that defied every law of science. It was a metallic cylinder, about a meter tall. Its surface glowed with a soft blue light that didn't reflect the flashlights. It seemed to generate its own power. It was covered in complex mathematical equations that would make a modern physicist cry. No one dared to touch it. The object emitted a low-frequency hum that you could feel vibrating in your very bones. Professor Miller checked for radiation, but the levels were normal. Still, everyone felt the same thing. They were standing in front of something that didn't belong to human history. Leo didn't hesitate. Before anyone could grab him, he stepped forward and wrapped his small arms around the humming blue cylinder. The vibration instantly intensified. The walls of the chamber began to shudder, and ancient dust rained down from the ceiling. For a terrifying second, everyone thought the entire structure was going to collapse. Then, with a hiss of escaping air, the cylinder split into 2 perfect halves. Inside were 3 items that seemed to vibrate with their own energy. A rolled-up manuscript made of a material tougher than any papyrus, a circular device with gears, made of an unknown pearlescent metal, and most shockingly, a jagged shard of rock that pulsed with a steady inner light. "It's a meteorite," Dr. Sarah whispered, leaning in closer. "But look at the edges. It's been polished into a lens. Someone carved this." Professor Miller unrolled the manuscript with trembling fingers. It was filled with star maps and constellations drawn with terrifying precision. But they weren't maps of the sky as seen from Earth. They were perspectives from other points in the solar system Mars, the moons of Jupiter details no ancient civilization should have known. At the end of the scroll was a prophecy written in a strange mix of old text and symbols. Professor Miller's voice shook as he read the preliminary translation. "When the child with clear eyes decodes the first message, the awakening begins. In 7 moons, the portals will open. The children of the stars will recognize the children of Earth." Everyone looked at Leo. His eyes were a startling, unusual green. He had found the first message on April 8, 2018. Exactly 7 lunar months later would be November 8, 2018. The countdown had begun. But the real shock, the thing that nearly broke Professor Miller's mind, was on the very last page. It was a list of 17 names. They weren't ancient names. They were modern. And there, at the top of the list, was Leo Miller, born in 2014. "This is impossible," Miller gasped. "Carbon dating says this scroll is 500 years old. How can it have my son's name on it?" Later, Dr. Sarah would discover that the ink used for the names was different. It was only 4 years old. Somehow, the list had been updated while the cylinder was sealed deep underground. Leo sat on the dusty floor and looked at them with a calm that was far beyond his years. "It's not time travel, Dad," Leo said softly. "It's shared memory. Every generation has people who can connect to the before. I'm one of them. There are 16 others around the world. When we all wake up, we will remember why we are here." The footage of that moment became the most classified file in history. Within days, reports flooded in from Mexico, Egypt, Japan, and India. 17 children, all roughly the same age, had begun exhibiting the same impossible knowledge. On November 8, 2018, at exactly 8 p.m., all 17 children across the globe spoke the same words at the same time. The cycle is complete. We have remembered. Now we can teach. After that night, Leo went back to being a normal boy. He didn't remember the trance-like episodes anymore, but he started writing. By the age of 5, he had filled 143 pages with equations for clean energy, water purification designs, and agricultural methods that could end world hunger, all explained so simply that anyone could understand them. Professor Miller spent the rest of his life studying those pages. "Leo gave us a gift," he said in his final interview in 2023. "He showed us that knowledge is never truly lost. It just waits for the right mind to come along and find it." It is now 2025. The 17 children of the prophecy are now teenagers, and they are quietly changing the world, one breakthrough at a time. Leo is now 11, studying archaeology in a special program for gifted students. Every year, on the anniversary of that Sunday morning, he visits the sphere in Buga. He touches the symbols with a smile, like someone greeting an old, dear friend. The world looks at the sphere and sees a mystery. Leo looks at it and sees a bridge. Because some truths are written in places only the right eyes can see, and some stories don't have an end. They are just waiting for the perfect moment to continue.